Welcome to Food for Thought. This is a webinar series here at Sanford Health and Good Samaritan Society where we are lifting topics that are important to diversity, equity, and inclusion. My name is Natasha Smith. I'm the head of DE&I here at Sanford, and today we're talking about inclusive holidays. I am so privileged to be joined by two members of our organization from both Sanford Health, Good Samaritan Society, and we're going to dive into the topic of inclusive holidays. We're going to talk about why they're important, the impact that it can make when we are inclusive during the holiday season, and I'm really excited for this conversation. So before we dive in, before we get started, I just want to take a moment for introductions with the two individuals that I have joining me today. I have Dr. Goswami, based out of Fargo, North Dakota, and Christy Ask with the Good Samaritan Society. Ladies, do you want to go ahead and do a quick introduction? I'll start with you, Dr. Goswami.
Hi, good morning. Hello, Natasha and Christy. I'm Arundhati Goswami. I'm an anesthesiologist. I work at Sanford Fargo. I have been with this organization for, in some form related to the organization for almost 20 years now. I came to the United States from India in 2002. And about a year after that, in 2003-04, I joined a residency here in Fargo. After completing a year of that, I left for a 3-year stint to study further, and then came back and joined the organization on staff, and I've been here since.
Thank you, Dr. Goswami. Christy, what about you?
Yes, my name is Christy Hallenbeck. I'm so honored to be a part of this conversation. My role is Senior Pastor and Director of Mission Integration for the Good Samaritan Society, part of Sanford Health. I'm based out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. By background, I am an ordained pastor in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, which is also the denomination Good Sam is affiliated with, and have been in this role for just about 2 years. And even in thinking about this conversation this morning, I just kept thinking, I love my job, that I get to participate in this discussion. It's a unique opportunity for a pastor to be a part of a healthcare system and to discuss topics like this. Really passionate about the DE&I work of Sanford and Good Sam, so eager for this discussion.
Awesome. Thank you both. I said it before, but it's just a real privilege, I think, to have the two of you join for this discussion. It's one that's really important, and I'm so excited to see our organization lifting the topic. So as I said, we're going to talk today a little bit about inclusive holidays. The premise here is that, in our society, in our communities, and, inadvertently in our workplaces, Christmas is really centered. And that's not necessarily a negative thing. That's not a bad thing. But it does create a certain level of responsibility for us to educate ourselves and really learn about those non-dominant observances that are not centered in our society or in our workplaces, in our communities. And so I'm really excited for the ability to do that. When we think about the holiday season, oftentimes we're thinking about this time of year. We're thinking about late December when the snow is on the ground. I don't know about our listeners, but it is very white outside my window right now. And that's what we associate with the holiday season. But the holiday season truly does start much in advance, of late December. I think about the months of October and November that have really meaningful holidays like Dia de los Muertos in the Hispanic community and Diwali that's in the Hindu faith. And so I'm excited that we have Dr. Goswami here with us today, where we can talk a little bit about her faith, the observance that she and her family find meaningful. And so I would love to hear just a little bit of your perspective, Dr. Goswami. Do you want to share a little bit about that faith and the observance that you and your family hold dear?
Sure. Thank you, of course, Natasha, for inviting me to this discussion. I feel honored, but I also realize that both you and Christy come from, this is your line of work too, and you're probably very knowledgeable about it. And I am talking really about, what it means to me. So it's a very individual opinion. I do want to draw attention to the fact that, when I talk about what is important to me, I am a small part of this large country called India. And even though, like, my faith is Hindu, I'm Hindu by birth, by practice, I want to bring out that our country has other religions too. And about 15% of our country are Islamic people. Christianity is about 3 to 5%, and there are other faiths. And in a country of 1.6 billion plus, that is a large number of individuals. I might be digressing. I might be kind of veering off, but I also want to say that something that's quite unique to my upbringing. My dad was in the Air Force. So even within India, we moved around a lot. Every 2 to 3 years, we packed up and we moved. And even though we might have been on a military base, we interacted with the local community. So in that way, I picked up a little bit from different parts of India. And I'm not, India has a lot of states, and each of these states have their own languages, their own cultural practices. And even though a holiday might have the same religious story behind it, the same religious significance, the ways of celebrating that holiday differ quite a bit when you go from one region to the other. And I was so fortunate, just because of my background, that I moved and I got to imbibe all of these differences. And on a military base where everyone came from different religious backgrounds, different languages, different states, we all lived like one and celebrated everything together. So that, I think, is a little bit unique to me, just because of my childhood. I will tell you now, of course, I'm Hindu. I am from a state called West Bengal. We speak a language called Bengali. And for me, in the Hindu calendar, where we have so many festivals, so many small little stories, such an ancient culture. We have small days that take on significance based on where you are, which part of the country you are. But I would say the big ones for me during the year would be, I'll just go from January to December. Sankranti is a festival that you celebrate in the beginning of the year. And we, it's unique for, lighting of these, creating a bonfire and throwing these puffed rice into it. Then came Holi, which is, quite popular now, even in the United States. The music group Coldplay actually shot a video with imagery from Holi, where we throw colors on each other. You can, throw a water balloon, water, and it's all fair game on that day. Then around April is when our community celebrates our New Year. And that is different by a few days here and there in all the different states. So that comes there. And then there's Ganesh Puja, which, I'm married now. My husband is Hindu too, but he's from the western part of India. And so he speaks, and his family speaks an entirely different language. They celebrate many holidays that are different from what my family celebrated. And Ganesh Puja is very important in the state of Maharashtra. And while we all worship the same deity in all the different parts of the country, in Maharashtra it has special significance, and it is their big holiday. So I finished up my high school and med school in that area. So, and then married a man from there. So that has become a very important part of my life now. And then going into October, which you rightly pointed out, is it's a very religious, holy part of our year, and different communities celebrate different components of that. And the underlying story is the victory of good over evil. But there are different versions and different mythological stories that are celebrated more in different parts of India. And where I come from, Durga Puja, or the worship of the goddess Durga, is a 4-day-long holiday period. And it is unique because it is not just a personal family celebration. It is essentially a community festival. That was of great importance to me, and is still of great importance to me when I think of celebrating one religious event. That is something that always stands out. And, to me, that's my major festival. Shortly after that, we've got Diwali, again with the same theme. And Diwali, if I were to draw parallels with other festivals that people here would identify with, is not just religious, but it takes on like an entirely social celebration. It's a season. And while it has a prayer that people will perform at home, there is a lot of celebration within the community. People will be ready over weeks before that, getting ready and planning for that celebration. And it's also the business communities celebrate that as beginning of their new business calendar. So the business community celebrates that in a big way, and just because of how it's celebrated with the lights and the fireworks, it's a standout festival. And it is celebrated in most parts of India, almost all parts of India, in very similar fashion. And then last but not the least, and I know I've been talking for such a long time, I love this festival called Bhai Dooj. This is a very special festival which celebrates the bond between a brother and sister. And there is another festival which also is around August. It's called Rakhi or Raksha Bandhan. And these two festivals celebrate the love of a brother and sister. And usually, the brother will come visit the sister, you share presents, and it's just so dear to me. I do have a brother, a younger brother that I've bullied and bossed around, but that is our day of love.
Well, Dr. Goswami, I think that overview was absolutely incredible. You made so many amazing points that, I would maybe just highlight that stood out to me. I loved that you talked about your father's military service and how that exposed you to many different cultures and many different spiritual practices and different viewpoints at a young age. Not everybody is afforded, that kind of a perspective. And so I just think it's incredible that you were able to appreciate all that his military service had to offer for you. I think that's an incredible story. My husband is in the Air Force as well. And so I resonate, with just that ability to connect with people that otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to. But I also thought it was important that you talked about, the year as a whole, and how depending on what you observe or your faith identity, your major celebration might not occur in the last, 3 months of the year at all. I think about the Lunar New Year, Chinese New Year. There are a lot of different observances throughout the world that just simply don't take place at the same time of year that we tend to associate with a holiday season. And I think that's a really important takeaway. I think it's a really important consideration. I know friends of mine that are practicing Muslims, the Ramadan holiday is not, in the end of the year either. And so I've had to be really cognizant of that while many of us are ramping up and heading into the holiday season, many of our friends, our patients, our residents, our colleagues, our community members don't have that same big ramp up, at the end of the year. Many times that major holiday has already taken place. And so I just really appreciate you sharing your lived experiences, the things that help shape your worldview and your appreciation for cultures that are different than your own, and also how you and your family come together to celebrate. I have to be honest with you, I think that the sibling holiday is one that we could all benefit from, because I have 4 children and I don't know that my children appreciate each other or are willing to give to one another. And so I think we could probably benefit from that in my household. I'm curious, given the discussion and, all of the information that you shared for us to reflect on, Christy, you are a faith leader, both in the community and, on behalf of the Samaritan Society. I'm really curious about your perspective and just your reflections on this as you think about your role as a faith leader and simultaneously creating those inclusive spaces for individuals with a diverse range of backgrounds. What does that look like for you? What were some reflections that you had?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Dr. Goswami, I'm just like reveling in all that you're teaching us about your own traditions and the various traditions of India. And thank you so much. I think in this conversation, there's just sort of this overarching irony that has come to be in Christmas itself, the very fact that Christmas is centered as the holiday, which we can't deny it is here in our geographic context in the upper Midwest in the US. There's irony in that fact alone, because Christmas, theologically, biblically speaking, Christmas is a subversive concept itself. Our Christian tradition claims that God came to an unwed mother who had no power into this sort of nothing town called Bethlehem, and God came in the form of this vulnerable child. I have my Bible open in front of me. One of my very favorite passages in the entire Bible is called the Magnificat, from what we call the Gospel of Luke in the Bible. And Mary sings this song when God, sorry about that alert. Mary sings this song in proclamation and praise when God says that Mary will bear the Savior of the world in our tradition. And among her words is that God has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. So the entire context of this story is uncentered, that this story is about how we see the divine outside of the centers of power. And so there's irony that our holiday has just sort of bled all over. And we would do well as Christians to remember that, and that part of being faithful to our tradition is creating inclusive spaces where we recognize that there are ways that we can experience our own holiday by listening to the experiences of others. And in our context in healthcare, I think that also gives us this really powerful opportunity to see how Christmas can be manifest at the bedside, and in these places, for the most part, our patients and residents and employees never want to be at the holiday season, which is often places of medical, physical uncertainty, relational separation. Most of us don't want to be in a hospital or an acute care or a skilled nursing facility on Christmas and over the holidays, and yet those are places where we have an opportunity to really experience what this holiday originally was supposed to be about, which is seeing that God, as we proclaim God in the Christian tradition, is present in unexpected places and in places of sort of somber and vulnerable circumstances.
You know, Christy, I think that those reflections are nothing short of powerful, which as a faith leader that I have a lot of respect for, I would have expected nothing less. But you said something that really stood out to me and I think is so important for this conversation. You know, we know that the Christmas holiday is very centered, you know, in our communities. But you made the comment that we can celebrate that holiday by listening to the experiences of others and how that can bring true meaning to the holiday itself. And so I think it's just an incredible way for us to frame a conversation like this. But I'm also curious, you know, Dr. Goswami, from your perspective, when we think about inclusive holidays or listening to the guidance, you know, of someone like Pastor Christy, when we're able to listen to the lived experiences of others or create inclusive spaces, what's the impact of that? Have you had an experience where you do feel included, your voice is heard, your culture or your religion is appreciated? Can you share a little bit on that?
Of course. Pastor Christy, that was wonderful. That was so noble and really what religion is all about. You know, I think celebrations begin as small little seeds, and as society just moves on, they take on so many layers. You know, there's the reason, the actual reason why we celebrate something, and then there is the how, and how of the how, why, and just the pattern of celebration seems to evolve. You know, sometimes small religious festivities become such big social events, and you know, the celebration around it takes on more importance rather than the root reason why we celebrate. And they're both good because, you know, I think happiness is what we all want. And if we recognize that, you know, one can't fault people for forgetting the original reason for celebration. And Natasha, your question is also so layered and kind of difficult to answer almost. But I'll try. You know, I think any community, wherever we are, we celebrate what is important to us. And as global migration takes place, other individuals move into a community, you know, this question arises: how do we kind of intermingle, intermix, respect, and recognize? You know, I view this as almost like a tipping point. So once the number of people of a certain community increase and they have a different tradition or a different celebration, you know, that's when this conversation starts to roll, and we say, oh, you know, there's a significant number of people that are celebrating something different, and how do we recognize them? Social media, I think, has really made it quite, you know, has dispersed this knowledge of other faiths celebrating their different holidays, and people have gotten a peek into how other people do things. So I think that has really spread the word. It looks different in different communities. If you were to go to California, and where I think every third person is Asian, or a state like New York, which I think last year maybe even announced Diwali as a school holiday, So there are tipping points in a community where, the number of people that are practicing something different increases to a point that, people around them start to look and kind of accept that as part of, this community and want to be either part of it or want to recognize it, or, there's enough number of people that space starts to get created. Specifically with the Hindu holidays, we follow the lunar calendar. So we don't have a fixed date that we celebrate Diwali on, or Durga Puja or Ganesh festival that I was talking about earlier. So our calendar shifts. It will be within the same, 15 days, 30 days mark, but it kind of moves around because we follow the moon. So it's difficult for non-observers of our faith to kind of remember that, 25th December is Christmas every year, but that's not the same with Diwali. So they cannot remember, it's harder for the community to remember that shifting date.
Well, if I may chime in, Dr. Goswami, you just said something that jogged my mind that seems relevant for this conversation, and thinking of what we have in common, because one thing we often forget in the Christian tradition is that our celebration of Easter is based on the lunar calendar and also shifts. So just fun to, as we think about our differences and how much we have to learn about that, we do have similarities worth remembering too.
That's so unique. These years I realized that Easter was not on the same day, but I never thought that there was a lunar calendar date predicting that. I did not know that. But Natasha, if I could, I'll go back. I mean, I think you asked me for a personal story, or maybe my personal input as to, what the importance of inclusivity is. And I think, to answer that, I always feel that I have had the privilege of, being surrounded by people who have a higher level of education. I have had the monetary means to celebrate my holidays, even when I was not supported by others, or, even though it was not a community festival. So my perspective of this might be different from someone who comes into the country, has limited means, is by themselves in smaller numbers, where they don't have their own community to, join in. They don't have any people to join in with and celebrate that. I'm proud to say that the Indian community over here has an association, and very recently the Indian population over here got together and have also bought a small area, and we've built a temple, well, not built, but bought a building where we intend to celebrate our holidays and our religious festivals in a place that we could call our own. I think the biggest thing about inclusivity is all of us, want to be recognized for something that is very inherently ours. We want to be seen without alterations. And sometimes we share that. We share that with our close friends. We might wear our traditional clothes. We might consider them close enough that we invite them into our homes and feel comfortable enough sharing our religious holiday, our food, our space with them. But when the community recognizes it, we feel accepted. We just feel that, we are part of this, that there is an acceptance that goes beyond your profession, beyond your work. It's a social acceptance of an individual, because religion is often at the core of us. It's our, it's a very, it's part of our being. And when that is accepted, we just feel part of our community.
That is such a beautiful way of framing that, Dr. Goswami, and would just, maybe highlight the comments that, individuals without the means or the numbers to gather and celebrate, how their experiences might be drastically different, than those that do have larger shares of their community present or have the means, to establish a temple in the communities in which they live. I think it's a really important call out for this discussion, and I think it's a great way to wrap this up and say it is so very, very important. I think that is what creates the responsibility of us all to come together, because, we don't know what someone's unique situation is, but we can always go that extra step to learn about them. Here at Sanford Health, we do have a inclusive holiday discussion guide. If you are a listener thinking about this conversation and you are wondering, what can I do? How do I ask someone about their faith traditions or their meaningful observances? We do have that resource available to you. Again, my name is Natasha Smith, DE&I here at Sanford Health. I have been so privileged to be joined by Pastor Christy and Dr. Goswami today. Thank you for joining in on a conversation around inclusive holidays.